Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last Council Tony Cordy. To start the official proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Jara country, on which the members and elders of the Jara community and their forebears have been custodians for many centuries and have performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region. Council meetings are audio and video recorded and are made available to the public by electronic media, including YouTube. This meeting is a special meeting of council and it's to hear submissions in relation to our 2021-22 budget. A couple of housekeeping things that we need to deal with first. We've got councillors, we've got all 7 councillors present. We have our CEO, our Director of Corporate and Community Services, Lisa Knight, Director of Infrastructure and Development, Acting Jude Holt, people from governments and indicators. Apologies, leave of absence, nil. Declarations of interest and conflicts of interest, councillors. Nothing to report. Excellent. Item 4.3.1, 21-22 budget public submissions by Carolyn Ross. Councillors, I've got a recommendation. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Neer.
I recommend that Council notes the submissions to the proposed annual budget 2021-2022 and hears the presentations in support of these submissions and considers the submissions to the proposed annual budget 2021-2022 prior to the adoption of the budget at the meeting of Council to be held on Tuesday, 16th of June 2021.
Thanks for that, Councillor Neer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Maltby. Any objections? Being no objections, I declare the matter carried. We'll hear from the presenters, and I'd like to change the order a little bit. We're going to hear from Steve Evans from the Taradale Community Forum Incorporated. They're going to be first up this evening, so could Steve come to the lectern, please?
Thank you, Mayor Cordy. My name is Steve Evatt, and thank you for giving us the time tonight to run through our submission. We have sent through copies of the submission. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to have a look at them. I understand we have 3 minutes tonight, and I'd like to use 2.5 of those 3 minutes by giving you a brief video that will explain further the concept of the Taradale teenage recreation space.
Just bear with us a moment, Steve. We won't include this in your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I've been sure.
Okay, thank you. As you may be aware, we're applying for a grant of $30,000 to take it to the next stage, which involves a detailed design and costing for the future area. I forgot to mention that I brought the brains of the operation here tonight. This is Willem and Charlie, who were instrumental in contributing to the design concepts and review some of their ideas, and on some of their ideas, the designers, to put them into action. So nothing more to say. I'll leave it with you, and your appreciation will be much welcome for the health and the physical health and mental health of Taradale.
Thanks for that, Steve. If you just wait a moment and see if councillors have got any questions.
Any questions, Jeff?
Councillors?
Me first. Thanks. You're going to keep the provision in your plan?
The small pavilion?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're intending to refurbish that. We do use it for the Mineral Springs Festival, keep that in the chairs and tables. It's very important.
I was just going to say, I think it's great that kids got involved in doing this, and that's really worth, from my behalf, consideration. How many children in Taradale in total? Do you think would estimate
We
use
don't
this?
we don't have an exact figure, but the school, for instance, has gone from when my wife and I arrived in Taradale 10 years ago, it's gone from 2 students to 100 to 96 this current year. We've got a lot of people coming from Kyneton, as evidenced over the weekend, using the small playground, and the teenagers and those a bit older struggling for something to do and something to do.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll?
Well, Steve, have you got the 30 grand? Have you got a quote from a person to say they can do it for that much?
It could well be less than that, but we have been talking to 2NH, and they've been very proactive in working through this with us and working with the kids too.
Okay, anything further, councillors? No? Thank you very much, Steve.
Councillor Cooley, thank you.
We'll go back to the published order. The next speaker we want to hear from is Vera Hopkins. Vera, yeah.
Hi, can we start now? Hi.
Please go ahead, Vera.
Hello, hello. All right. My name is Veronica. I live in Barker Street in Harcourt, and I've lived there for 10 years. Some months ago, I put forward, 4 or 5 months ago, I put forward a petition that the road Barker and Bakeshore Streets, both roads be sealed. I've lived in the area for 10 years. The roads are both dirt. It's become problematic. There's so much dust on the roads and the corrugations. It's no longer, I feel the roads are no longer fit for purpose. And I've spoken to all the residents on the 2 streets to get their opinions, and they're in favour as well, and they thought it was a real hazard for their health. So Harcourt in particular has been targeted for development as part of the Harcourt plan. And what was once a tiny rural enclave known mainly for growing apples is developing into a suburban site. And, you know, we've seen some very good development here. I'm probably a bit random because I'm nervous. I haven't done this before, but never mind, I'll continue on. Barker and Bakeshore Street form the main grid of the township, and they're the only 2 roads that are unmade, and I think they really need to be sealed as much as the rest of the roads. My argument also is that some 40 years ago, the 2 aforementioned roads were originally fire access billy cart tracks, but much has changed since then. Over the years, housing has burgeoned in these 2 roads without much consideration for traffic management. I consider, and the community considers, no longer fit for purpose. In the summer months, over the 6 month period, because it has grown, that hot, dry period, the dust becomes unbearable and the corrugations increase hazard. These are residential streets, not thoroughfares for increasing traffic. And I believe the roads need to be sealed with design structures put in place that control speed and access. And I would say I started this petition 4 months ago, and since that time, there's been an additional 2 subdivisions and 3 residential houses that are feeding into both roads. And so there'll be more and more traffic that runs into those roads. It's a tiny suburban street, and we really need to consider the health and well-being of everyone who lives in those streets. And I'd like council to consider that.
Thanks for that,
All right.
Vera. If you could just wait a moment, please. Councillors, have you got any questions? This one, Councillor Henderson.
Nice to see you, Vera.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
So you're saying that there's more housing on
Yes.
this road now than there was because,
Yes.
you know, fit for purpose, like road past my house is dirt, but hasn't changed much in the 35 years I've been there or so. It gets graded occasionally, but you're saying that because of the greater density of population, more and
Yes,
more people are using it.
yes.
And it's not just people living on the street. You're saying people are driving through to other places? Or
Yes, I said that in my petition, that people are using it as a thoroughfare. They're coming through Pippin Court, which is the new development.
Yeah.
And they're using it to go through. There's also an industrial site that's come in those last 10 years, and they repair cars for on sale. And there's more and more service providers that are going up and down that street, and there's no speed control, there's no signs to control the speed or the access. And a lot of children, a lot of dog walkers, a lot of cyclists, because it is a path to the mountain bike park, are using that road. And I think it's really fundamental to the health and well-being of all the residents. Yeah. And I'm putting this forward on behalf of all the residents. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Other councillors? Vera, I'll just comment that I grew up in Buckley Street, Harcourt.
Yeah.
And this area has been a problem for 60 years. You've given me a couple of ideas for an article I've got to write on paper, so read about it in the local paper. But thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Other councillors? Councillor McClure?
Thank you, Vera. Can I just confirm, so you're talking about the section in Bagshaw Street from Buckley Street to Barker Street,
Yeah.
and then the entire length of Barker Street from Bagshaw to Martin Street?
Yes, that's correct. It's worth you having a look, and I'm sure you're familiar with the roads, and that it is really difficult, and I think it's dangerous.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
presentation this evening. Thanks, councillors. Move on to the next presenter, which is
Sorry, just pick up the
Good evening, Councillor Cordy and other councillors. My name's Lou Ciprone, as you know. I want to talk to you on behalf of the Castlemaine to Maryborough Rail Trail Committee about a 55-kilometre safe scenic trail for walkers, bike riders, horse riders and people at all levels of ability that will pass through Guildford, Newstead, Carisbrook, all the way to Maryborough. In our view, the Castlemaine to Maryborough Rail Trail is a no-brainer because it clearly ticks all boxes. It's connecting communities, safe off-road travel activity, alignment with Victoria's Trails Strategy 2014 to 2024, alignment with Victoria's cycling strategy 2018 to 2028, alignment with Central Goldfields Shire's own walking and cycling strategy 2017 to 2026, reducing carbon emissions and providing, importantly, much needed economic boosts to both shires from tourism. In the first instance, we want to achieve funding for a feasibility study to test the idea and to make sure that it is a winner. In just 10 months, 2,200 online petitions have agreed with us. That is, it's an amazing idea. That is entirely consistent also with our membership 200 odd and the views that we've received consistently from the many visitors to our stalls that we've held in both municipalities. The rail trail is good for physical and mental health, good for business and good for the community. The professionally conducted feasibility study will answer how much it'll cost to build and to maintain, as well as important social, environmental and economic considerations. As we've indicated in our submission, we're somewhat disappointed that there is no draft budget allocation for a Castlemaine to Maryborough Rail Trail feasibility study. We ask that you reconsider such funding by adopting one of the following funding models, setting aside 20k conditional upon Central Goldfields, Shire Council and State Government doing the same, making a total of around 60k to fund the multidisciplinary feasibility study, or setting aside a smaller amount of 6k or thereabouts for a smaller scale scoping study with no other conditions attached. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Lou, councillors, Councillor Maltby wants to ask a question.
Has Goldfields Shire committed?
We've had discussions with Central Goldfields. There is an interim, we understand there's an interim understanding between Mount Alexander and Central Goldfields to seek funding from tourism. But as far as that's tourism, Bendigo. But as far as direct funding for a feasibility study, we are there.
And you mentioned two types of figures, one was 6,000 and one was 20. Is that 6,000 separate?
Right, as I
Or is
indicated,
it 6,000 from each?
the 20,000 would be contributory
Yeah.
because the information we have is for a professionally produced that is fully fledged feasibility study that takes all those things into consideration. We're looking at something in the order of 60,000. The 6,000 is a scoping study, is what we understand is involved in the scoping study, which is a lower order preliminary kind of study.
So the 60,000 study, will it actually give you a figure for continual maintenance?
It will cover all those aspects. In terms of, I mean, there is a lot to cover, and therefore, hence the cost, because there is upgrading of surfaces, there's consideration of bridges, passes, and maintenance, and the rest. So it will, as has happened in Mount Alexander, in Massillon Ranges and other areas, there are 40 odd rail trails around Victoria. We've been in touch with Massillon Ranges, where the funding has been achieved for 2. There's one in Hepburn, for which funding has been provided. Also, Indigo Shire in North East Victoria, and they're all that order. And we have received the actual copies of those feasibility studies, yes. gives us an idea of how comprehensive they are. Thank you.
Crystal?
My understanding, Lewis, the state government hadn't come back to say if they're going to use the train line for passengers or freight. Do you know anything different than that?
Yeah, we haven't got anything definitive at this stage. What we have access to, which is public information, is a PTV, Public Transport Victoria, report on the feasibility of reinstating closed rail network or lines. There's 5 of those. And it's clear that the cost to reinstate, realign for faster trains and ongoing cost is hideous. I mean, it's in the order of, if I remember correctly, 500 million to reinstate, because all the rails got to go, it's not suitable. The alignment's got to be changed, and then there's an ongoing $4 to $6 million per year to keep it running. Our costs to date, and that's levied from other municipalities where rail trails have been running for some time, such as the Great Central that the cost involved in setting up, in instating and maintaining a rail trail is something like 2 or 3% of that. So it is minuscule by comparison to reinstating a rail service.
Councillor Anderson?
I'm just trying to, so you're asking us to put money into a feasibility study, still waiting to hear from Central Goldfields, excuse me. Is that correct? Oh, Central Goldfields haven't committed as yet.
Well, we've spoken to them, and we're speaking to you folk as well.
Yeah.
And
also, state government, you're expecting to, or you're hoping to get money from them as well. Is that right?
But we haven't got that far yet.
I haven't actually asked them for any money yet.
No, not at this stage. We've been working hard gauging community sentiment, which is overwhelmingly in favour. And so our first call is to get to ask for funding for a feasibility study through the council here.
Okay.
Another point to note is from it's VicTrack terrain that we're talking about. VicTrack's website indicate that they'll not negotiate with individual groups, and it's through council. So it is incumbent on us to work through council.
Thank you, because that would be my next question. It's probably very premature, but whose asset would it be of completion?
Well, the website, their website talks about repurposing and rental arrangements for their assets, and that includes their buildings for such uses as art hubs and so on. So my understanding from what's on their website is that it remains their asset.
With some kind of arrangement with the users for maintenance, or they to keep on the maintenance.
This is something we still need to explore.
Right.
I think that's part of the reason for a feasibility study.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much for your presentation to us this evening, Luke.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I need to set up.
No, that's all right.
The next speaker we're looking for is Francis Knight.
Thank you for this opportunity to make a public statement about my concern that there's no clear, safe pedestrian access to the Castlemaine Botanical Gardens. My letter of the 14th of May sets out the traffic conditions and the road layout which make this pedestrian access really dangerous with a high risk of accident. I feel it may not be fully appreciated how many people actually come to the gardens on foot. And I live in Kennedy Street, and I'm also a frequent pedestrian visitor to the gardens. And I can say that particularly during summertime and school holiday time, family groups are regularly making their way along Kennedy Street to go to the gardens. Some of them may be local families, some of them may be staying in holiday accommodation, which advertises that it's within walking distance of the gardens. Some of them might be people who've come up for the day by train and they're walking from the station. I've never asked them, but there are constant family groups making their way along the street. They walk on the east side of Kennedy Street because that's the side that has the footpath. At the end of the street, they can see the entrance to the gardens diagonally. And the footpath at that point leads them left, sharp left, so that they then cross Kennedy Street, cross the railway line, and then they find themselves confronted with Walker Street. And they have to cross Walker Street at the intersection of Downs Road. But they have to consider the traffic going up and down Walker Street, and also the traffic coming in and out of Downs Road, plus traffic coming out of Kennedy Street and traffic coming out of the Mill complex, which is, becoming an increasingly popular venue. I'd like to reiterate that these are busy main roads. The Walker Street, Parker Street is a major road going up to the bacon factory, and Downs Road is a feeder road for the Midland Highway. Now, when you get to the end of Kennedy Street, your safest option is to cross Parker Street, the extension of Walker Street, then cross the railway line, and then cross Downs Road by means of the existing traffic island, which has a little cut in it so that you can take a wheelchair or something through. There's no actual signage to encourage this option, and the curbing and the footpath at that point actively discourage people from doing that. I would respectfully like to suggest that councillors and council officials and other people who are interested in this might like to try this themselves. So if you drive along Kennedy Street, park your car around Hunter Street and walk to the end of Kennedy Street. Imagine you're with a disabled or elderly friend in a wheelchair, or imagine you're with a family group, including a couple of small children on bikes, perhaps a toddler in a pushchair, perhaps the family dog. Then make your way to the garden's entrance from the end of Kennedy Street and try to maintain a stable blood pressure while you do it. And joking apart, these roads are busy. And I have seen groups of people really dithering and distressed trying to get across Walker Street. Having several years ago spoken to council officers about this, I was prompted to raise this again now because recently I found myself to be part of the problem. I drove out of Kennedy Street, turned right into Downs Road, and I found there were a woman with a child in a pusher right in the middle of that intersection. And I'm sure that before she started out across Walker Street, she would have looked both ways, but she wouldn't have seen me coming out of Kennedy Street because you almost make a kind of dog leg to make that turn into Downs Road. And she wouldn't have seen me, and suddenly there I was. I, of course, paused until she was safely on the other side, but another car had come up immediately behind me. So, there's no messing about with the traffic in that area, and people can't have eyes in the back of their head. As I say, I have helped people from time to time to cross over there, groups of people literally teetering and dithering, not knowing really how to proceed. So I've also was prompted to come forward with this now because of the recent decision of the council not to proceed with the proposed replacement of the Froomes Road Bridge. And I know this doesn't mean that there's a big pot of cash lying around, But I would hope that it means perhaps there's a little bit of flexibility in the budget to tackle a problem, a real problem at the other end of the gardens. At least to install signage and alter the footpath design at the end of Kennedy Street. So to actively discourage pedestrians from crossing Kennedy Street and the railway line and then being obliged to get into the gardens by crossing Walker Street. It is very dangerous there. If they could be persuaded to cross Parker Street first, then the railway line, then Downs Road by the little traffic island, they would have a much easier route and a much safer route. And so I would commend that to your attention. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation, Francis. It's excellent. It's a very changing area and we can see it's getting busier. Councillors, have we got any questions for Francis? No, I think everyone. Councillor Mulvey?
Because it is getting busier and busier,
Yeah.
when people leave the gardens to go across to the Warnmill complex,
Well, they do. I mean,
so how are we going to do that?
well, exactly. It's not an easy thing because you've got the railway crossing there as well, and it's be difficult to have a pedestrian crossing. I'm not saying this is an easy solution. Probably a bridge.
No.
Exactly. Another bridge. No more bridges.
If there was a crossing down in the middle of Walker Street near the entrance to the mill,
Yeah.
would it solve both issues?
No, I don't think so. Because you've got these family groups. You have to admire them. Often these little kids, they've walked all the way along Kennedy Street. It's kind of a long, boring street for children. And I think once they get to opposite the gardens, they just want to, they don't want to walk away down the street and then come all the way back up again on the other side. I think we probably do need a pedestrian crossing down there by the mill. So that when they finished in the gardens, they can come across and have an ice cream. But I think as an interim measure, at least if we could get people at the end of Kennedy Street to cross over first and then do the railway line and not have to cross over Walker Street right in the middle of that intersection with Downs Road.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? I think we all understand the problem there, Francis. So thanks very much for your presentation. Take that one on board with our budget deliberations. Next speaker was on the list is Antonia. Antonia, if you can just pronounce your surname, so we've got that straight.
Oh, it's the Aussie version is Van Burns. Good evening. Thank you for listening to me. I too have never ever done this, but I've got a serious issue here to share with you. I came to your beautiful town and it just fits me like a glove, and I just want to be here, and my children have followed me here as well. So thank you. Now, I've just moved into Yates Street, down the bottom where it's gravel. A lot of you will be used to that and very familiar. Now, there's no control of the stormwater. I'm appalled. What happened was, I live at number 8. I got a call at 8 o'clock one morning from my neighbour. He'd run the SES for sandbags and there was a downpour. The bomb site said there was 25 millimetres that day and 36 the next day. My foundations were like a swimming pool and they were gushing underneath the fence, and he was panicking about his weep holes. He thought it was going to get a flood through the foundation. So we've had a bit of a tense time. We're wonderful neighbours, but we both got very sleepless and anxious, and I ended up spending over $2,000 to put drains down my fence so he could sleep at night. Now, I've started to look a bit more at that street, and on the north side of the street, all the stormwater legal discharge points come out onto the street. On the south side where I live, and now as all those lots have been taken up, they've all been sold, and there's all evidence that there's going to be construction. So there'll be no vacant lots on the south side anymore. So there's been development, and in fact there's been a subdivision of one of those. So there's more and more people that are going to be affected. So what happens with the storm water on the north side is that it flows onto the gravel road, and there's no such thing as a drain. If you walk along, I'm going to leave you a packet of photos tonight that shows that there's no functional drain. And what a pity, because down the bottom of Yates Street to the west, you've got that wonderful engineered underground system to take the stormwater away, but the stormwater's not getting to it because there's no functional drain. And in fact, some of the residents on the north side have crossovers for little use because the drains that are connecting the crossovers aren't there. Up the top of the street, where it meets Wheeler Street, the residents on the corner there has 4 vehicle entries off Yates Street with not even a fingernail width of a drain to take the stormwater, and also there's stormwater coming down off Wheeler Street as well. And it flows down past 3 houses that have no drains, no crossovers, and then it comes to a dip, and the dip sends it to the south side of the street where I live. And on that day when we had that flooding alarm, we stood on the footpath, or not the footpath, the verge, with the building supervisor and my neighbour and myself, and there was a sheet of water that just came across from the other side of the street, almost as wide as this room, and it was just heading down what used to be the gully, but now it's rezoned, of course, residential, and we've got houses there. And so I think it's a very serious problem because legally local governments have to deal responsibly with public stormwater, which it is once it's got onto the street, and they leave themselves liable if it flows into people's property and potentially could cause damage. So I think our council is leaving themselves open if they don't do something about this. That piece of Yates Street is probably, that's gravel, is probably about the length of a football field, so it's not long. And at either end, there's curbing, channeling, and sealed road. So to match up just that little bit of Yates Street and deal with it like the rest of Yates Street surely won't blow the budget. And also it will enhance the preservation of harmony of the residents. We've got a great bunch of people that live in that section of Yates Street. It would be a pity if the people on the north side resented the people on the south side. And it's a great risk that may happen because all the south side people have their legal point of discharge down the bottom to the south, to the gully. So the only impact that they have is that the stormwater that comes from either Wheeler Street up the north, up the top, or from the north side of the street. And I would suggest that we can make better use of the engineering that's there to manage that stormwater. Some of the other residents are also worried about things like potholes and dust and so on. But I think the stormwater management is really the one that is frighteningly and very crucial for you to address.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Councillors, any questions? I think we'll understand the stormwater and drainage, so thank you for your presentation, Antonia.
I'll just leave these on the table because I'm not here.
The next one is from Mount Alexander Cycling.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Could you
introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Peter Strang from Mount Alexander Cycling. Firstly, why cycling? Cycling is great for the Shire. It can result in improved health and fitness, environmental and social benefits, and less expensive transport for some. It can also bring visitors here. What is Mount Alexander Cycling, or MAC? MAC is an organisation of the key cycling groups of the Shire, set up to promote bike riding of all types and to work with council and others. We want to see more people cycling more often for transport, exercise and enjoyment. We want to see more people coming to the Shire to ride our roads, tracks and trails. Now, this will happen if there is a better understanding of where people ride and walk and why. If there are safe conditions for riders and walkers, and if there's good infrastructure for bike riding. Now, what we'd like to see in the budget this year is some money for a cycling and walking behaviour study of Castlemaine Town Centre. This could cost perhaps $25,000 or $30,000, or if you can't stretch things to that extent, perhaps $8,000 for a smaller pilot study. We'd like to see funding to start for the collection of data about bike riding. This is essential to set priorities for infrastructure, for grant applications to state and federal government bodies, and to provide base measures for the next cycling and walking strategy. And there are apps such as Strava, which mean that some data could be collected at a fairly low cost. What we'd also like to see is that adequate funding is allocated to individual projects to ensure that cycling and walking are considered in all town planning, streetscape studies and road building, so that there's adequate facilities for cycling and walking. Why do we want this? There's increased interest in bike riding within the Shire, but there's also concern about unsafe and sometimes poor conditions for cycling. Now, sales of electric bikes are booming. This means that some people who used to drive are now travelling by bike. Others are riding when they're actually a bit older or otherwise less capable, so they can't ride a normal bike due to injury or illness. On the weekend, a ride of silence was held in Castlemaine to commemorate those killed or seriously injured on the roads. About 60 riders took part. So this is expressive concern about some of the conditions. On the weekend, there were also several well-attended events to promote the use of cargo bikes, which can carry large loads, including children and shopping, and can be an alternative to the family car. So more people are taking up options like this. We see many visitors coming to the Harcourt Mountain Bike Park. So people come to ride. Other people come and stay in the Shire and they bring their bikes with them. But there's very poor information about where they can ride safely. Meanwhile, other communities are providing more, better and safer cycling conditions. So in conclusion, what does all this mean? More people are riding bikes for a range of reasons, although the conditions for cycling in the Shire are not good. Current bike riders and future riders, including your children, grandchildren, friends, neighbours and visitors, all deserve better. We can help you achieve a great result for bike riders and for the Shire. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Peter. Councillors, any further questions? Looks like they're all good, Peter. Thank you very much for your submission. We'll see how we go. Next presenter is Lee Mead.
Evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight to our submissions. I'm Lee Mead and I'm representing myself and the Tarrangale Cactus Control Group. Two recent community surveys, one done by the Tarrangale Cactus Control Group and one by the Malvern Community Plan, have established that our community believes that the natural environment needs to be protected and controlling noxious weeds is extremely important, and that Mount Alexander Shire has a significant role in both of these issues. Our native biodiversity is threatened by noxious weed infections by displacing native flora and fauna species and harbouring pest species such as rabbits and foxes, and now, sadly, Queensland fruit fly. So these two local surveys have revealed the community believes that as a land manager, Mount Alexander Shire has the responsibility to control noxious weeds, but sadly doesn't have enough staff, time or resources to adequately control these weed infestations. The community believes that Mount Alexander should invest more and do more to protect our natural environment and should employ more staff in environment officer roles. Currently, there is a significant lack of staff and resources invested in our natural environment. There's been only one 0.6 environment officer position for several years, and I believe for the last few months there's been no environment officer. There's way too much work for one part-time position. For example, the environment page on the website is extremely minimal with very little information available for community members. There's a lack of organised weed control and most importantly, essential follow-up treatments. It's also too difficult to work alone as a part-time, especially as a part-time staff member. It would be much nicer, much better and more effective if there's a team to work with support for each other. One part-time position, there's no time and resources to create and distribute information to landowners. And this, I think you end up relying on volunteer labour. I've got a couple of examples of the lack of resources that have happened in the past. Our group created this brochure about wool cactus a few years ago. It's got information about warning about the weed and information about our group, and on the back how to control the species. We wanted to get this to every local property, but by mailing it, we can only reach 50% of the population because they only go to people who accept junk mark. So we approached council staff to actually mail this out on our behalf to ratepayers, and we were told that there was no resources available to do that. So we missed the opportunity to reach 50% of our community. And another example, just a couple of years ago, our group was concerned, especially about the lack of information about the responsibility that property owners have to control noxious weeds. So we created these 5 ward-specific weed brochures, especially with information about legal responsibilities, and with funding, with a grant from the council. But it was with the understanding that the digital form of these brochures would be uploaded onto the Mount Alexander website on the Environment page, and that the hard copies would be included in welcome kits to go to all new ratepayers. And I understand that neither of those things have ever been done, and I put that, assume that is because the 0.6 staff member just doesn't have enough time to do stuff. So another issue I'd like to raise is the issue of increasing subdivision of farming lands into smaller lifestyle properties. This is resulting in an increased number of absentee property owners. And often, especially if these people are previously from the city, they are often ignorant of their legal responsibilities to control weeds, and also they're ignorant of the significant negative impact that their weed infestations have on their neighbours and on the public lands. And we believe that council has a major role to play to inform and enforce weed control with absentee property owners. We need more environment officer positions so that we can increase weed management and essential follow-up treatments. The current Alexander Shire Environment Plan is totally non-committal towards weed control. So we need more staff to create an actual weed management plan with long-term ongoing weed control strategies and measures that are outcomes that are measurable. We need more officers to engage with and educate all the new landowners about their weed responsibilities, and to focus on enforcing weed control with, in particular, absentee property owners to reduce the reinfestation of all of our surrounding environment. Increased funding for the natural environment is needed because weed control is not effective with the current system of one-off grant distributions. Effective weed control is only effective when there's ongoing follow-up treatments with long-time permanent funding. And I think my closing comment would be that everyone in our community benefits from natural green spaces for our good health and well-being.
Thanks for your presentation, Lee. If you just wait a moment and see if councillors have got any questions for you. Councillor Gardner.
Hello, Len. So what sort of, you done some, obviously I think it was last year or year before council passed bylaws about the weed control. So I'm assuming from that.
That's a vast improvement. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm assuming from that you are getting at there needs to be a level of enforcement. Have you got or thought about how many staff that is required?
Well, yes, I would suggest that to triple what we have now, three part-time staff in a small team, I think would be fantastic. To do all those things like, creating a weed management plan and things that really are necessary.
We've got a question from Councillor Mulvey.
So have you got an estimated cost of what one of those employees would be paid? The lady's given a very good presentation. I'm sure she's done her homework, Councillor Gardner.
I haven't been in the workforce for a while, so I would imagine you'd need to commit 100,000?
Each.
No. I don't know, total for additional employees? Sorry?
Make it double.
Okay, I think good answer, Lee. Councillors, have we got any further questions for Lee? We've still got a few more questions. Councillor McClure's got a question, Lee.
Thank you, Lee, it was a good submission. Who did all the control of the wheel cactus in the past? I mean, I used to drive out there years ago and the hills were covered with it. Who's done all that work?
How recently are you talking?
Well, 30 years ago, in the last 20 or so years.
Yeah.
Well, there seems to be a reduction in the amount of wheel cactus around.
I'd like to claim, I'd like our group to claim that. Indeed, the Tarragona Cactus Control Group has been operating for 16 years now, and one of the original goals was to increase awareness of the local property owners about the weed and how to control it. And I think we seriously do have possibly 70% of the local property owners on board, and they are happily controlling their wheel cactus. But the other 30% are the absentee property owners and the new property owners who don't know about what they're supposed to be doing. And they are just continually reinfesting everybody, and the park and the Morton Historic Reserve, etc. Tonight, just the last few days, we've actually had ABC News doing a story on wheel cactus, which is on the news tonight at 7 o'clock. It's supposed to be, if it's not bumped by COVID. Yes, there's another area up near Wedderburn, Mount Bunya, that's a really core infestation. So there's that area and ours, and if it's worth seeing how bad it is still on some properties. It's
bylaws. I mean, I'm not familiar with that. Do they cover that, the eradication of that weed?
the council bylaws.
Yes.
Yeah, well, any noxious weed, all property owners are supposed to control any noxious weed, and wheel cactus is a declared noxious weed. Yeah.
So it's an enforcement. It's enforcement.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Lee. I just noticed, I was driving some sheep on Woodbrook Road yesterday, and I noticed some of your cactus from Malden to my road, so I'll need to come and get it back.
Yeah, no, sadly, it's getting further. Yeah.
It does travel, so the sooner we get rid of it.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation this evening. We'll now just Margaret Panda here. Margaret.
I work as a volunteer coordinating a project to get rid of needlegrass type weeds from Castlemaine roadsides and parks. This work's done partly by Bushcare Ecological Land Management with a grant from council, and partly with more than 350 hours of volunteer labour, both on ground and organisational, this financial year. Some areas now appear to be free of needlegrass, and in others we've achieved a big reduction. But needlegrasses are only some of the many noxious and environmental weeds in the Shire, as Lee has just pointed out. And last year, council gave $10,000 extra for weed removal. Thank you very much. This helped tackle some newer, small infestations, which is much more cost effective than waiting till weeds have taken over and become entrenched. To get rid of the many dense infestations that have been here for years, council will have to spend much more than $10,000 each year for many years. Seeds in the soil will keep producing seedlings for years, decades with broom and gorse. As volunteers, we're happy to give our time to help the environment, the community and council. But I think it's unreasonable for council to rely on volunteers to do its core work so it can cut paid staff costs. In departments such as infrastructure, with 37 full-time equivalent staff proposed for this year, that's 2.2 more than last year, council doesn't rely on volunteers. This contrasts with natural environment, in which council relies on volunteers plus 0.6 paid staff. I'd like council to increase the hours of natural environment staff to at least 1 full-time, as well as funding extra ongoing weed removal with a lot more than $10,000 each year. And I'd like council staff to organise this weed work with an opportunity for residents' input instead of residents being expected to organise it. The reason I'm concerned about weeds is that they're a major threat to what's left of our natural ecosystems. The Shire is a special place, not only because of the built heritage from the last 170 years, but also because of remnants of our natural heritage, ecosystems that have been here for thousands of years. These are a natural asset of the Shire. More natural environment staff could help protect our remnant vegetation. In summary, I'd like much more emphasis on environment from the budget, including more funds to combat weeds and more hours for natural environment staff.
Thank you, Margaret. Councillors, got some questions? So, Councillor Henderson.
I'd just like to say thank you very much, Margaret. You make a very succinct point, and I think it's very clear to us, especially with Lee speaking before, that we need to turn our eyes onto the environmental responsibilities. So thank you for at least bringing that to our attention.
That would be great if you did that.
Okay, the next speaker is Pool Incorporated.
I might be able to get my laptop as well. Evening councillors, evening staff, council staff. Council staff. I'm Sarah Jane Peters. I'm the president of the Tooting Pool, and I have Jackie Heath and Philip Walker also from the Committee of Management of the pool. Some of you are new councillors and you may not know very much about Tooting Pool and its unique history and management structure. The pool, which is on Crown land, is managed by a volunteer committee who employ 8 to 10 operational staff each summer. We raise funds through memberships, pool entry, kiosk takings, corporate sponsorship, grants and swim lessons. Our single biggest cost each year is staff wages, and this has been provided to us for the last 10 years by you, the council, via a 3-year funding agreement. This allocation has been a vital part of our pool's success, as it has provided the Committee of Management with the financial certainty that they can employ staff and open the pool each season. The Tooting Pool has been incredibly successful operating under this partnership arrangement. The community has enjoyed the benefits of a huge amount of volunteer effort and relatively small amount of council money. The local community continue to provide financial and in-kind support, with 5,127 people attending the pool this season. We have 345 members, 203 children attended our swim lessons, and 25 regular volunteers provide cleaning, man the kiosk, assist with our operations, events and programs. The current council allocation is $42,000 annually, and this only just covers the cost of staffing those 8 to 10 people at the pool for a 16-week season. This was a figure that was agreed on about 6 years ago, and it no longer reflects the Life Saving Victoria Code of Practice for Safer Public Pools, which recommends that a minimum of 2 lifeguards supervise the pool whenever it is open to the public. We've operated the pool for the last 10 years with only 1 lifeguard who is backed by a trained volunteer. The Committee of Management have decided that we can no longer afford to risk community safety by continuing to operate under this model. We've calculated that to increase lifeguard supervision to a level that is the minimum recommended by Lifesaving Victoria, our staff budget will need to increase to $74,500 annually. Although we've been incredibly good at getting corporate sponsorship, tanks, funds for vacuums, heating systems for pools, we get grants every year, we have other sources of revenue which we create ourselves, this is an amount that would be beyond our abilities to raise each year. We're therefore asking that Council increase our annual allocation to cover the cost of implementing Lifesaving Victoria's Code of Practice and the guidelines. In order to keep our staff costs down, we have made a plan to reintroduce a junior lifeguard program to increase the number of trained lifeguards in the community, increase the flexibility of our rostering, and provide better coverage for our shifts. Using a senior and a junior lifeguard on each shift, we will ensure that the pool will increase its safety, it'll meet the guidelines and provide for a future pool of trained staff in the community. As of next summer, we will have to move to increase our lifeguard supervision levels to that recommended in the Code of Practice. Without an increase in allocation from the Council, we will unfortunately be forced to reduce the number of days that the pool is going to be open. And at the moment, we're open 7 days a week, and we will have to reduce the level of service that we provide to your community. The Tubing Pool has provided community recreation and connectedness for our community for 10 years on a shoestring budget with a lot of volunteer hours and at very little cost to Council. The operation of the pool relies on the use of volunteers, which is going to continue, but we can no longer risk using our volunteers as our emergency responders, and we cannot ignore Lifesaving Victoria's Code of Practice. The risks of not increasing our lifeguard supervision to the community, to Council and to us as the Committee of Management are now just too high. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks for that. Councillors, we've got some questions.
I've got a question, maybe our officers, maybe I have to ask the CEO, our director. Are we expecting Tubing Pool to present to us separately? No, this is it. This is it. Right, thank you. We've got a submission from you. Is it part of the budget? Which sets out the increased numbers of service. So it mentions not only lifeguards but pool manager.
Yeah.
So pool manager rate of pay seems a bit higher than the lifeguards, and you're increasing the manager's rate numbers of hours as well as the lifeguards. So I would have thought if you just needed going from 1 to 2 lifeguards, you just double the hours of the lifeguards. But
no, we'll need to have more management because, and the Council has already always paid for our pool manager. We will need to increase the number of manager hours because once you have more staff, and the manager is already managing about 8 or 9 people, their hours will increase. We have to do training programs. If we do go to the junior lifeguard program, as we want to do, because it's going to save us so much money, we will need someone who's going to have to who supervises the juniors. They'll have to be people who do crossover shifts. At the moment, our managers are having to, because a lifeguard works a minimum 4-hour shift, our manager is having to come down for an hour to take over between the lifeguards' 2 shifts and come down from wherever other place they are to do toilet breaks. It's really unworkable.
So the manager is a lifeguard?
The manager is always a lifeguard. So the manager does have busy days as well. So if we have a day where we start to get up past 75 people, we know it's going to get hotter in the afternoon. It's really not possible to call in a lifeguard very quickly because they're usually at the Maryborough pool or at the Kyneton pool or at the Castlemaine pool because we all share a pool of lifeguards. So the manager is the person who steps in.
So pool manager is like a senior lifeguard that's more reliable to be there all the time.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Gardner.
I think as Christine was suggesting, we had a briefing and discussion today. Now, my understanding is council officers are waiting further information, some of the budgets and etc.
We've done
Is that-
we've done our financial statements.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what else was being waited for. We have now finished our pool report for, how many people came through the gate.
Oh, no, I think it was more about justification for the extra money.
So more detail.
Well, is that how I'm reading it?
I did
There was
submit
a
to the
request.
I did submit to the council officers how we were breaking down the number of hours of junior lifeguards and senior lifeguards and pool manager crossover. So I did send that all through to the council officers.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillors, do you have any further questions? Councillor Moffat.
So you would say in the last 10 years or so, you're viable?
Yeah. We had an income of $145,000 this year.
Yep.
And we have to manage that. And
Yeah.
please understand, a $145,000 budget is hard to manage when you're a volunteer committee. We have 8 to 10 staff, and we have had staff problems, the same as all the other council pools have. And we run a swim school ourselves. I'd say we are one of the most successful pools in the area. We have 5,000 people came through the gates this season, and we are only open for 58 days. It is the shortest season we've ever had, and yet our numbers of entries did not drop. We have 345 people who actually pay extra to be members of our pool every season.
Very good. Councillors, any further questions? I'd just like to acknowledge the work that the Chippenpool volunteers and the management do. It's a fantastic example of the community working together. So we'll see how we can help you. It's been a very successful team effort. So well done to everybody involved, particularly in relation to training and employing young people. So well done, and thanks for your submission this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That brings us to the end. So I thank everyone for attending this evening and their presentations, and we'll